I still remember the day my son looked me in the eye and told me I was just a peasant who didn't deserve to attend his wedding. The moment those words left his lips, something inside me went hollow. You'd think as a mother I'd scream or cry or beg him to take it back, but I couldn't do any of that. Instead, a strange calm washed over me, almost as if I'd finally reached the end of a journey I'd always dreaded. I walked away, letting him keep all his pride. He had no idea that the day of his wedding, I would have a surprise of my own. Let me take you back to where this all started, so it makes more sense. My name is Marion. At 38, I'm not exactly old, but life has carved a few lines on my face and silver threads have started weaving through my hair. I've been a single mother since my son Troy was 2. His father died suddenly in a car crash, leaving me with a baby, a tiny house on the outskirts of our small town, and a mountain of hospital bills from an illness that had plagued him before his death. We hadn't even owned a car, it was his brother that he'd borrowed. Yet that accident changed our lives forever. I dropped out of college just before Troy was born, so job prospects were scarce. Nobody wanted to hire an inexperienced, undereducated mom who needed flexible hours, but I was determined. A local diner took me on as a waitress. The pay was low, the hours irregular, and my tips could vanish if the town's economy dipped for even a week. I supplemented it all by cleaning offices 2 nights a week. Waking up every morning, I'd steel myself with one thought: this is for Troy. Someday he'll go to college, and he won't have to bend his spine for every dollar like me. Because my husband's death came with unpaid medical bills, the little house we had was also at risk. I scraped together money from anywhere I could, overtime shifts, rummaging for bargains, taking fewer meals so Troy could eat properly. By the time he was 5, I managed to pay off the last chunk of those bills. He was too young to understand how enormous that felt for me, but I remember dancing around the kitchen, tears flooding my face. I thought, finally, a fresh start. Troy was my world. He was bright even at a young age. He'd latch on to new ideas so easily. His teachers praised him for being curious, eager to learn, talented. Proud as I was, I also noticed a streak of restlessness. He was always looking for something bigger and better. Maybe that's normal for a kid, especially one who's seen his mother strain for every penny. I thought it was just childhood curiosity that would settle down once he grew older. When Troy turned 16, his curiosity evolved into a burning desire for more than our small life offered. He took on the role of being class president, spent his weekends at academic clubs in the city, and rubbed shoulders with teens from wealthier families. They had fancy cars, big houses, parents in suits or designer clothes. Our little home with peeling paint and second-hand furniture suddenly felt inadequate to him. I knew it hurt him that we couldn't keep up with certain luxuries, though I never blamed him for his frustration. Still, I kept going. I covered his tutoring fees, drove him to extracurriculars in my old borrowed truck. My boss at the cleaning job loaned it to me whenever she could. I wanted Troy to have every opportunity. When acceptance letters from top universities arrived, I was so proud I felt dizzy. He chose a prestigious school out of state. I had no idea how we'd afford it, but I told him we'd find a way. And we did. He won scholarships for part of his tuition. I took a small bank loan for the rest. I can't recall how many nights I cried from sheer exhaustion, but as long as Troy got what he needed, I was willing to push my limits. I visited him once during his sophomore year. Wandering the immaculate lawns of that campus, I realized how drastically our worlds had diverged. Troy was always polite to me when we were in public, but it felt as if the son I raised was drifting into a different universe, one filled with glass buildings, starched collars, classmates who talked about business ventures and European vacations. I convinced myself that distance was normal. Kids separate from their parents, it's part of life. Yet a pang remained in my chest each time I noticed him hesitating to introduce me as his mom. He'd say, "Oh, this is Marion," or "This is who I grew up with," in a voice too careful, too measured. I'd just smile and extend a handshake, pretending not to notice the little shift in his tone. I blamed no one. I told myself everything was fine. After graduation, he found an incredible job in the city. Everything about it was so different from the diner in our dusty little town. The pay, the status, the new lifestyle, it seemed grand. He rented a sleek apartment downtown, started wearing tailored suits, even changed his accent a bit. I felt left behind, but I also felt proud. My son was becoming someone important. I'd done my job. The first big crack came when I visited him unexpectedly. He was throwing a housewarming party. One of his new colleagues answered the door, startled by the sight of me in a worn dress and cheap shoes. She kindly let me in but cast a few nervous glances at Troy. All night I could feel their judgment. "Whose mother is this? She looks so provincial." I pretended not to hear the hushed comments in the hallway. Troy was distant that night. He hardly introduced me to anyone. I tried not to take it to heart. This was his event and I showed up unannounced. But as I left, I overheard him telling a coworker that I was an old family friend. I stood by the coat rack, my stomach turning, his words echoing in my mind, old family friend. When had I lost the right to be his mother in public? I swallowed my tears, though they threatened to spill the entire bus ride home. A part of me wanted to confront him, to demand answers, but my chest felt heavy. I told myself maybe it was a misunderstanding, or maybe Troy felt pressured among these wealthier folks. I tried to let it go. Not long after, rumors about Troy dating a woman from a very prestigious family started circulating. I only knew bits and pieces. Her name was Beatrice. She was from a line of doctors and attorneys, tall, educated, refined. In short, the kind of woman Troy had dreamed of impressing. He never told me anything about her in detail, but I gleaned from social media that they were together. He posted pictures, the two of them on a yacht with her parents at a fine dining restaurant attending a high society fundraiser. It all felt foreign to me. Then in a single phone call, I learned they were engaged. "You're what? Engaged?" I remember gripping my phone so tightly I nearly crushed it. The news stunned me. He hadn't even mentioned her name to me directly, and now they were engaged. My heart pounded with conflicting emotions, part excitement for him, part heartbreak that he hadn't even bothered to share the steps leading to this moment. He sighed and said, "Yes, Mom, it's just that things happened fast. Her parents wanted it formal. We had to decide quickly." He didn't apologize for not telling me, he just laid out the facts. Then he added, "By the way, I need some of my documents, my birth certificate, that stuff." I said, "Should I come by and drop them off? I'd love to meet Beatrice if she's around." He hesitated. "Actually, could you just mail them? It's easier. We're super busy planning, and Beatrice's parents, well, they have so many connections, it's all happening at once." I felt my chest tighten. Mail them? Who was I, a courier? But I forced a calm answer. "All right, I'll mail them. Congratulations, Troy. I hope you two are very happy." The phone went silent. I sensed he wanted to hang up already, so I whispered a quick goodbye and ended the call. The ringtone droned in my ear. My eyes drifted to the old photo of him at age 7, wearing a baseball cap 3 sizes too big. He was grinning, hugging me around the waist, beaming with the innocence of a boy who loved his mom. And now that same child had grown into someone who saw me as an inconvenience. I tried to keep my spirits up. Maybe once the wedding was set, I'd be invited to help plan or at least join a fitting. That's what mothers do, right? But days turned into weeks. Troy never reached out. I caved and texted him, "Son, let me know if you need help with anything." I got a reply 2 days later, "Everything's sorted. Just keep yourself free in case we need something last minute." Not a single word about meeting his fiancée or her parents. No request for a mother's presence, support, or advice. I consoled myself by tidying up my house, imagining maybe they'd visit. I replaced the peeling wallpaper in the living room, used half my savings on a second-hand car so I could drive around more reliably. I was so sure that eventually my son would need me. After all, mothers are an essential part of a wedding, aren't they? Finally, the day of heartbreak arrived. I'll never forget it. He came to the house unannounced. I saw him through the window wearing a crisp navy suit, shoes polished to perfection. He barely smiled when I opened the door. I ushered him in, trying to contain my delight at seeing him, but I sensed a crackling tension in the air. He cleared his throat and said, "Mom, the wedding is set for next month." My face lit up. "Oh, that's wonderful. I can't wait to see you walk down the aisle. Will it be at the city cathedral or somewhere else? Let me know how I can." He cut me off with a sigh. "Mom, it's not that simple." My heart pounded. "What do you mean?" He hesitated as though struggling to phrase something horrible. "Listen, Beatrice's family is, well, they have a certain standard. Her parents are very focused on their image. They know I come from a less fortunate background and they're okay with me because I have a good job, but they're not comfortable with," he gestured vaguely around the living room, "with this environment, with you." I stared, trying to process. "Not comfortable with me? Why on earth?" He exhaled and his tone sharpened. "Don't be naive. You know how snobby these people can be. They don't want to mix with people who haven't moved in these circles. They just have a certain mindset. I'm trying to keep the peace." My stomach twisted. "Are you telling me they don't want me at your wedding, Troy?" He swallowed, his eyes wouldn't meet mine. Then, with forced composure, he said, "Look, I'm not saying you can't come, but if it's going to cause tension, maybe it's best for everyone if you just skip it. It's not like you'll fit in with that crowd." I took a half step back. "I won't fit in with the crowd. I'm your mother, Troy." He pinched the bridge of his nose in frustration. "It's not about that. Please understand. I know you tried your best to raise me and I'm grateful, but life moves on. People level up. If we drag old baggage into this event, it'll tarnish it. I can't risk my relationship with them just because of some illusions of sentiment. Look at you." He winced as if in pain. "You dress like a peasant. You don't know how to talk to these people. You'll embarrass me." I stared at him, words gone. My son's face was cold, his stance unwavering. This was the child I had labored for, starved for, bent over backward to support, and he stood here, spitting poison at me. My mind spun, searching for a response. But what do you say when your own flesh and blood deems you worthless in the face of social ambition? Then he delivered the final blow. Please, Mom, just accept it. Don't come. I'll send you pictures afterward. If you care about my future at all, respect this. I'm not going to let the woman I love or her parents look down on me because of you." Something inside me snapped, or maybe it broke. I quietly asked, "So, I'm just a peasant to you?" He said nothing, but his silence confirmed it. My throat burned, tears threatening, but I forced them back. I finally breathed, "All right, Troy, if that's what you want, I won't come. You're a grown man, live your life as you see fit." He nodded, relief flickering across his face. "Thank you for understanding," he murmured, heading for the door. Then he paused and said, "Send me your bank info. I'll wire you something for your silence so you won't be upset." My heart nearly exploded with shock. He wanted to pay me off not to come to his wedding? I mustered the last shred of composure and whispered, "No need. Go on, we have nothing more to say." He left, the old wooden door slammed shut behind him, echoing in the hallway. I sunk onto the couch, my entire body trembling. How had we come to this? I'd been told years ago that grief over children can sometimes be worse than any heartbreak in romantic love. I never fully grasped that until now. I spent the night pacing around the house, occasionally recalling the memory of him as a toddler waddling around in diapers, clinging to my leg, calling me mama. In that haze of sorrow, a strange sense of acceptance began to form. He didn't want me at the wedding, fine, but I wasn't done with life, and if I couldn't attend, maybe I would celebrate something for myself that day. Did I not deserve a little piece of happiness in the midst of all this? I decided to do the unthinkable. I'd host a tiny ceremony of my own. It wasn't about revenge or overshadowing him. It was about letting go of the last vestiges of heartbreak and stepping into a new chapter of life, but I didn't know how. What kind of ceremony would it even be? I wasn't in a relationship. I didn't have a fiancé to marry. I had no illusions of a real wedding, but perhaps a vow to myself, a vow to treat myself with dignity. That dream sounded odd, but my heart said yes. I was going to reclaim my worth in a symbolic way. You see, for years, I'd denied myself everything. A year ago, I'd begun taking online classes to finish my college degree. I had quietly saved a little money each month, thinking maybe one day I'd start a small business, a flower shop or a bakery. And then life would get busy, Troy's issues would pop up, and I'd redirect my funds to him. My dreams always took a backseat. But that night, I realized it was time to make good on that dream. I had enough saved to lease a small storefront in town. I'd do it on my own as a vow of self-respect. If the timing coincided with Troy's wedding day, so be it. I wouldn't attend his event. I'd open my shop, brand new sign and all, and cut the ribbon by myself. A silly gesture maybe, but it felt right. I refused to sit at home weeping while my own child banished me. The next morning, I visited the bank and withdrew my savings. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough for a small deposit. Then I scoured the town for empty spaces. Sure enough, I found a quaint corner property near the library, perfect for a flower shop. My mind ran wild with ideas, bright blooms in the window, a cozy interior, maybe a reading nook for people to linger. As I pictured it, hope reignited in my chest. There was a snag. The landlord was wary of me. She said the last tenant left without paying, so she wanted a year's rent up front. I nearly balked. That was more than I had, but I remembered my father's old advice: sometimes you have to bet on yourself. So I bet on me. I put down every spare penny I had, then I spent the next few weeks cleaning, painting, and repairing. I exhausted myself, but my heart felt alive. Troy never called. I got an invitation in the mail, ironically enough, though it was obviously just a courtesy. The gold-embossed card read that the wedding would be at some grand hotel in the city. I stared at it with an odd sense of detachment. I wasn't asked to RSVP, it was probably a formality, so I tucked it into a drawer and resumed scrubbing old paint from the shop's walls. A few townsfolk wondered what I was up to. Some knew me from the diner, some from my office cleaning days. "Marian, why are you pushing yourself so hard?" they ask. I told them I was opening a shop, that I'd have a big day soon. They smile and wish me luck. No one pried, and I offered no details about Troy. Quietly, I grew excited for the day that was fast approaching, the day of his wedding, which would also be the day of my new beginning. One evening, as I was setting up shelves in the shop, the doorbell jingled. In walked a handsome, older gentleman in a plaid shirt, a kind face, and a warm smile. His name was Gordon. He lived around the corner near the park. He said he'd noticed my lights on late at night and got curious. I explained it was going to be a flower shop. His eyes lit up. "I'm a florist by trade, retired now. Let me know if you need help with arrangement skills." It felt like an answered prayer. I confessed I knew little about the finer art of floral design. So Gordon offered to teach me free of charge for a while. The next couple weeks, we spent countless hours discussing color palettes, how to keep stems fresh, how to handle delicate blossoms. He brought me fresh lilies, daisies, peonies, teaching me how to pair them. Each new technique felt like a door opening into a fragrant world. Sometimes we'd work until midnight, losing track of time in the swirl of petals and conversation. Gordon's kindness reminded me that not everyone measures worth by money or status. One day, as we were cleaning up, he said softly, "Your shop opens soon, doesn't it? That must be an important day for you." I hesitated, a lump formed in my throat. I wanted to tell him the truth, that my own son wouldn't let me attend his wedding that same day, but all I said was, "Yes, it means a lot." And Gordon gave my hand a gentle squeeze. "Then let's make it beautiful." The morning of the wedding arrived, Saturday. The city hotel would be brimming with extravagance, fancy suits, orchestras, and wealthy relatives. Meanwhile, I woke up at 5 to haul fresh flowers from the nursery. My heart pounded with anticipation, tinged with a raw ache, but I forced myself to focus. My vow was set, I'd celebrate me today. By 9, I had just enough time to arrange the final bouquets. Gordon was with me, carefully positioning the big white roses in a tall glass vase. I wore a simple, pale blue dress that day. No frills, no beads, just something I'd sewn to fit me well with a modest neckline. My hair was pinned up, a single lily tucked behind my ear. For the first time in ages, I felt almost pretty. At 10, a small crowd gathered outside my shop, a few old friends from the diner, my boss from the cleaning job, a couple of neighbors who'd watched me grow up. Gordon stood there, smiling proudly. I took a pair of scissors to cut the ribbon draped across the door. My heart fluttered. This was the moment. I snipped. Cheers and applause echoed on the quiet street. The sign above my door read, "Marion's Blooms and Gifts." I bowed my head in gratitude. My eyes stung with unshed tears, tears of joy and sorrow mingled. I whispered a vow to myself. I promised to live truly live from this day forward. But the day's drama wasn't done. Because around noon, when I was busy helping my first batch of customers, the shop door swung open to reveal Troy standing there, still in his tuxedo, face etched with panic. My heart thundered. He was supposed to be at the hotel, either in the middle of his ceremony or about to exchange vows. Why was he here? For a moment, neither of us spoke. My customers drifted away to give us space. Troy stared at me, scanning the shop, the flowers, the people. Then his mouth formed the words, "What are you doing? I was terrified when you didn't show up to the wedding." I nearly laughed at the irony. "Terrified, you told me to stay away." His face reddened. "It's complicated. Beatrice asked about you. She found out I hadn't invited you. She was livid. She insisted you come. She doesn't want any drama with the press or her family. She demanded we include you in the photos at least. But you weren't answering your phone. I tried calling, texting. Everyone started asking where the groom's mother was." I gazed at him numb. I turned off my phone. I'm busy opening my new shop. He glanced around, noticing the sign, the smiling folks outside. Is this why you didn't come to open some store?" "It's not some store," I said, voice steady. "It's my dream." He made an exasperated gesture. "Your dream could have waited a day, Mom. This is my wedding. I have guests from all over asking where you are." I took a deep breath. "Don't you remember your exact words, that I'm a peasant and I'd embarrass you? I was just following your orders." He slumped against a nearby display of sunflowers, brushing pollen onto his expensive tux. "I was wrong, okay? It was a stupid thing to say. I never meant for it to go this far." A wave of emotion crashed over me. "Why did you say it then? Why is your pride more important than your mother's dignity?" He shook his head, unable to answer. The silence spoke volumes. Just then, Gordon stepped inside, a worried look on his face. "Marion, everything all right?" Troy's gaze darted to him suspiciously, perhaps jealous or threatened or just confused. Gordon gave Troy a cordial nod and went back to assisting a customer, but his presence was comforting. Troy tried again. "Mom, I'm sorry, I messed up. You have every right to hate me, but could you please come now, even if it's just for the photos? Beatrice says it's important to have family included. The ceremony starts in half an hour. I'll drive you, just come with me." His voice was trembling with urgency. I closed my eyes. Once I would have leapt up, thrown my arms around him, and forgotten every wound. But too many lines had been crossed, and I'd promised myself today wasn't about chasing after someone who didn't want me. It was about me standing firm. When I didn't answer, he took a step closer, his voice breaking. "Mom, please, don't ruin my big day. I know I did you wrong, but can't you find it in your heart to forgive me for just today?" My lips curled into a sad smile. "Troy, your day was ruined the moment you told me I wasn't good enough. That wasn't my doing, that was yours." He looked like a wounded animal, searching my face for a flicker of softness. "Mom, I'm begging you, I'll do anything to fix this. If you don't come, Beatrice's family will think I'm some heartless jerk. They might call off the wedding. They're big on family unity. Everything was built on the assumption that I had a supportive mother." I stiffened. So now you need me because your in-laws demand family unity. I was only good enough to be recognized when it serves your interests. What about my interests? My voice caught. All I wanted was to see my son happily married, but I won't be dragged in last minute to save your reputation. Troy's cheeks burned with shame. I'll never treat you like that again. Please just come. After the wedding, I'll do whatever it takes to make it up to you. Silence thickened between us. I felt tears rise, the old heartbreak swirling, but I locked my gaze on him. I can't come, Troy. He looked stunned. Why not? Because I have a celebration of my own here, a ceremony that matters to me, a vow that I deserve better than being looked down on, and if you can't respect that, maybe it's best we live separate lives for now. His eyes darted around as if searching for an ally or some miracle. Finally, he whispered, "Are you rejecting me in front of everyone? You'd rather open some flower shop than see your only child get married." A hush fell. Even my few customers felt the tension. Gordon stood by the till, offering me a supportive glance. It gave me the strength to speak calmly. "I wanted to see you get married, Troy, but you made it clear that I was unworthy. Now you've changed your mind, but only because you need me to look good for your fiancé's family. My heart can't bend and unbend so easily." He flinched, tears brimming in his eyes. I saw him swallow his pride for a moment. He looked like that little boy again. "Mom," he said softly, "please." I stayed silent, hands trembling at my sides. Then something in him cracked. He muttered, "Fine, be stubborn, but don't complain if I never speak to you again." He turned on his heel and stormed out, just like that. He left me again, choosing pride over a chance at genuine reconciliation. As the door slammed, a swirl of crisp autumn air rushed in, sending petals fluttering. My chest felt painfully tight. Gordon walked over. "You did what was right for you," he said quietly, and I realized that no matter how strong I tried to be, my mother's heart was still shattered. That evening, after I'd closed up shop, I sat at the small table near the window, replaying everything in my head, half expecting Troy to burst in again or at least call. But he never did. I pictured him at the ceremony, maybe forging a smile for Beatrice's family while explaining my absence. I pictured the photographers snapping away the fancy canapés, the champagne toasts. I imagined him wearing that forced grin, hating me for not bailing him out. I'm not sure how many hours I spent there, lost in thought. Eventually, Gordon returned to check on me. We shared a quiet cup of tea among scattered rose petals. My tears finally fell unstoppable. I wept for the lost years, the misunderstandings, the scorn Troy showed me. Gordon just held my hand, letting me pour out my anguish. By midnight, I felt hollow but strangely at peace. In the days that followed, Troy didn't call. I scrolled through social media, seeing glimpses of a lavish wedding reception. A friend of a friend posted a short video of the bride in a sleek white gown, Troy at her side in a pristine tux. They looked like the perfect couple. My chest ached. That was my son stepping into a new life, and I wasn't there. At some point, rumors reached me that the bride's parents were furious at Troy for failing to include me in the planning. They'd assumed I was simply too ill or uninterested to attend. He had to weave frantic lies. Tension brewed, but no matter how messy it got for him, he never called me to apologize properly. Maybe he couldn't face me, maybe he didn't want to, who knows. Meanwhile, my shop flourished. People loved the arrangements and word spread fast in our small town. Gordon taught me advanced floral techniques, and soon I was employing another helper. The local library hosted reading clubs, and they'd stop by for a rose or two. I collaborated with a local bakery for a coffee and bouquet special. For the first time in ages, I felt financially secure. Slowly, I found a new version of happiness. Months passed. One afternoon, Gordon and I were sorting through a fresh delivery of tulips when the shop phone rang. A trembling voice said, "Mom, it's me, Troy." My breath stopped. I motioned Gordon away, picking up the receiver in a shaky grip. "Troy, are you okay?" He inhaled, his breath catching. "I'm not. Everything's falling apart. Beatrice's father lost a huge sum in some deal, and they're blaming me for not bringing in any connections. They keep saying my mother is an embarrassment, some shop owner in a small town, and Beatrice, we're fighting. She says I lied about having a close bond with you. She's on the verge of leaving me, especially since I can't fix her family's financial crisis." My heart twisted. I tried to stay calm. "I'm sorry, that must be very stressful." He sniffled. "I'm sorry, Mom, I was stupid. I said horrible things. I shut you out. I was ashamed of our past, but you're the only one who's ever truly cared about me. I need you. Can I come see you?" 1,000 emotions battled inside me. The mother in me wanted to forgive him instantly, but the wounded woman in me hesitated. Still, he was my son. I couldn't turn him away, so I said quietly, "If you want to come, I'll be here. I'll put the kettle on." Later that day, he arrived, wearing rumpled clothes, dark circles under his eyes. He stumbled into the shop like a weary traveler. I closed early. We sat in the back room among crates of flowers drinking tea. He poured his heart out, how life in the big city felt empty, how all the connections he'd built on fancy illusions had evaporated once trouble came, how lonely he felt, how badly he missed home, and how sorry he was. Tears streamed down his face as he finally admitted, "I called you a peasant, but you're the richest person I know in all the ways that matter. I wish I'd realized that before." Something warm and bittersweet lit inside me. I reached out and placed my hand on his. "It's never too late to realize, but trust needs time to mend." He nodded. "I understand. I'll earn back your trust." In that moment I saw a glimpse of the son I once knew, the boy who'd wrap his arms around my waist and giggle. I wasn't naive. I knew it would take more than a tearful apology. Still, a glimmer of hope surfaced. We talked until the sun went down, about the past, the wedding fiasco, his regrets, my new life. He even asked if he could help around the flower shop sometimes. The next day he did just that. He arrived early, trying to learn the trade. He was awkward at first, fumbling with stems and mixing up the flower food, but he stuck with it, face resolute. By closing time he was covered in petals and potting soil, but there was a tiny smile on his lips. Customers found him charming. Gordon teased him, calling him the flower apprentice. Troy laughed bashfully. That night we had dinner at my place, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, we laughed about silly memories. He apologized again from the heart. "Mom, if I could rewrite the wedding day, I would." My chest was still tight with old scars, but I nodded. "We can't go back, let's just go forward." And so we did. Over the following weeks, Troy spent less time at his fancy apartment in the city, more time in the shop. He told me things had grown distant between him and Beatrice, but he was trying to salvage it, uncertain if it was worth it anymore. I offered a mother's ear, but not too many suggestions. After all, he had to learn his own lessons. One day, as we arranged roses side by side, he told me, "Mom, thanks for giving me another chance. You have every right to hate me forever." I pressed a kiss to his forehead. "I could never hate you, Troy. It just hurt me to lose you, but I'm proud you found your way back." His eyes filled with tears again. He set down the roses and hugged me tight. I felt the walls between us melt, at least in part. Time went on. Beatrice and Troy eventually parted ways, no big drama, just the realization that they were too different. She moved abroad with her family. Troy stayed in town for a few months, working remotely and helping me. He saved up, found a smaller but meaningful job he liked, and slowly regained the confidence he'd lost. As for me, I expanded the shop into a little cafe corner with Gordon's help. Business thrived. And in that small store, mother and son found a new bond, maybe not the same as before, but strong enough to weather storms. One evening, long after we'd closed, Troy and I sat on the shop's front steps, gazing at the moonlit street. He cleared his throat. "Mom, do you regret it? Everything you did for me, everything you sacrificed." My eyes stung. "No, Troy, I don't. I just regret that we lost so many years of closeness because of pride and shame, but we have now, that's enough." He nodded, tears glimmering. Then he leaned his head on my shoulder, something he hadn't done since he was a child. I wrapped my arm around him, inhaling the scent of night-blooming jasmine from the planters. It felt like the start of a new story for both of us. Sometimes I think back to that day when my son said I was a peasant who didn't deserve to attend his wedding. The old hurt still flares if I dwell on it too long, but we survived it. I learned to stand up for myself, to build a life on my own terms, and to trust that love, real love, can mend even the deepest wounds. Troy learned that success means nothing if you step on the very people who gave you life. We're not perfect, we bicker sometimes. He still rolls his eyes when I fuss over him, and I still worry he'll stray from me, but we're together in a way we weren't before. I found my worth as a mother and as a woman, not a doormat, and that's a power I wouldn't trade for anything. I suspect someday Troy may marry again for the right reasons, with a better understanding of what family means. And this time, if he wants me there, I'll happily show up. Because deep down, despite all the heartbreak, I will forever be his mom. I will forever hold him in my heart, but I'll never again give up my own dignity. That's the balance we struck. So if you ever feel unworthy or shunned by the ones you love, remember this. You can still choose yourself, you can still blossom into whoever you want to be. And maybe, just maybe, the people who truly matter will find their way back once they see how brightly you can shine on your own. Thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button and subscribe. Do you have a story of estrangement or reconciliation? I'd love to hear, share it below. And remember, sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the courage to stand tall, even when it hurts.